Vladimir Putin has warned that the US anti-missile defense system in Europe risks the entire region's safety.
Rockets within a 500-kilometre range are being positioned in Romania now. Rockets with a 1,000-kilometre range are on the way. But what's even worse? These rockets can easily be replaced at any moment with long-range rockets that can travel 2,400 kilometres and no one will notice, even the Romanians. This is a huge danger to us, and we will have to react immediately. Those parts of Romania that didn't know what it's like to be in the crosshairs will have to face our countermeasures that ensure our safety.
The Russian president was speaking at a joint press conference with the Greek Prime Minister, Alexis Tsipras, during Putin's visit to Athens. RT correspondent Roman Kolchev has more from the Greek capital.
Vladimir Putin said that the American anti-missile defense system in Eastern Europe poses a real threat to Russia. That system was initially put in place in various countries surrounding Russia in order to counter the Iranian nuclear threat. But due to certain agreements that were made recently, the Iranian nuclear threat no longer exists. So all these new anti-missile defense systems that are being put in place all around Eastern Europe, basically very close to Russian borders, really pose a threat to Moscow. The Russian president said that Moscow is ready to cooperate on this anti-missile defense issues with the United States. However, he added that there's no one to talk to about that, as Moscow hears no response to this issue from the Americans.
Well, let's discuss the US anti-missile defense system in Europe further now with political commentator Lawrence Davidson. Welcome, Lawrence. Now, the US insists that its anti-missile defense system in Europe is not targeting Russia. What is your view of that?
Well, you might ask them who it is targeting. I mean, obviously, it's this placement of missiles in Eastern Europe sends a message to Russia. And the message is, look, you are not allowed to have a sphere of influence. Indeed, the Chinese aren't allowed either. The only one who can really have a sphere of influence is the Americans and their proxies in Europe. This has been this is essentially the Cold War theory of containment brought into the 21st century. So the whole notion that these missiles aren't targeted towards the U.S. or Russia is just baloney. I mean, who else are they aiming at? The Scandinavians? What?
As well as the issue of who they're targeting, another issue is where they're actually located. President Putin said that the U.S. could even place long-range missiles in Romania and do so without the Romanians knowing about it. Is that a likelihood, do you think?
Well, I don't know. It depends upon who's in charge in Washington. But in fact, there's precedent, I mean, for this. I mean, you've got, you have the history of missiles in Turkey. And those missiles were interchangeable in many ways as well. I mean, they were, I believe at the time, they were intermediate range missiles. But there's no reason why you can't upgrade the status of these missiles. I think that the Russian government has every reason to be concerned, and the hypocrisy of all this is to be noted. I mean, what would happen if Russia had given intermediate or long-range missiles to the Venezuelans? I mean, Washington would go, pardon the pun, ballistic. So essentially, we've got an opportunistic, potentially neoconservative war party in Washington, particularly among the Republicans. They're putting pressure on Obama and the Democrats. Probably Hillary Clinton has given her okay to this move, and it's a dangerous one.
Putin had lots to say about Romania. He actually said that they could be in the crosshairs if the US decides to place long-range missiles there. Did you think that Romania should be worried?
I would. In fact, I think they're already in the crosshairs. I mean, what is the Russian response to be? They're going to have to move their own missiles into proximate areas to the eastern border, particularly Romania. I mean, you could always replicate the Warsaw Pact strategy and just put 10,000 tanks on the Romanian border or something like that. I mean, Romania, by soliciting this move, has become a magnet, and Poland too. So you can't have this kind of arms in armory in your country and not be in the crosshairs. It's just the logic of the situation.
Many thanks for joining us, Lawrence. Our guest is our political commentator, Lawrence Davidson.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Below the bridge wing. Oh, this is definitely marking on top here.
5 knots. We have 2 Russian Su-24s currently conducting multiple passes at CPAs of 75 feet. Wings are clean, continuing to track and monitor.
On course 271 true at 3 knots. We have 2 Russian aircraft Su-24 further 2 nautical miles and closing.
We have 2 Russian Su-24s currently conducting multiple passes at CPAs of 75 feet. Wings are clean, continuing to track and monitor.
Tight formation, left-hand turn over the bow.
US Special Forces have been photographed for the first time in Syria, helping Kurdish fighters as they advance on Islamic State's de facto capital, Raqqa. The pictures were snapped by an agency reporter for AFP. If we cross over to the studio now, we can talk to RT's Murad Gazdev, who has more information on this story. Murad, what actually points to the US Special Forces?
Well, what doesn't? You know, you don't have to have a military background to see these guys for who they are. And they're there in Syria fighting with the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, that's Syrian Kurds and other groups, all of which are fighting ISIS. So they're helping them fight ISIS. And, well, the pictures kind of give it away. The low-profile helmets, the unique camouflage, the, you know, latest weaponry that doesn't go for export, advanced and expensive communications gear. These are American troops, and they're armed to the teeth. Yet, Washington maintains that they aren't there to fight.
They are not on the forward line. They are providing advice and assistance. And again, I'm not going to get into details, but that mission has not changed. Their role has not changed. They are not leading this fight. They are supporting those forces that are at the leading edge of.
Funnily enough, YPG SDF, officials on the ground are reportedly saying that these guys are everywhere. They're on the ground, they're in the air, they're on the front lines where the fighting is taking place, fighting against ISIS. So clearly, you know, if you listen to them, they're involved in the fight.
But is this evidence proof enough?
Well, we've heard for a while. Obama promised there'd be no boots on the ground in Syria. Well, now you have boots on the ground in Syria. Funny thing is, though, insignia. Often the insignia, American flags, are missing from their uniforms. And you have them, American Special Forces, with YPG, and in this case, YPJ, that's an all-female unit of Kurdish fighters, with their insignia on instead. Certainly, you know, that goes along with the American line of no boots on the ground, though it's no secret. And Washington, in fact, is perhaps been taking it as a bit of a joke.
I mean, there's no point in arguing the boots on the ground rhetoric. It's absolutely no point in it. I'm not disputing the fact that we have troops on the ground and they're wearing boots.
So there you go. Somebody in Syria is wearing boots.
So has Turkey reacted? What have they got to say about it?
It's no surprise. Turkey is hacked off, really. You have the Turkish foreign minister now saying that, well, take a listen for yourself.
It is not acceptable for US soldiers to wear YPG terrorist arm badges. This is double standards, two-faced.
The YPG has made more progress against Islamic State than anyone else. Yet Turks consider these guys, as well as all Kurdish military units, apart from Iraqi ones, to be terrorists, blanket. And you now have the United States, a Turkish NATO ally, their special forces wearing YPG insignia. So, you know, Turkey's understandably very upset about this one.
RT's Murad Gazdiev, thank you for that update.
There's breaking news coming into the Situation Room right now. Another U.S. military aircraft has had a close encounter in international airspace. This time, the Pentagon says Chinese fighter jets carried out what they call an unsafe intercept. Brian Todd is tracking this development for us. Brian, what are you finding out?
Well, we're getting this just in from the Pentagon from a U.S. defense official telling CNN that at least 2 Chinese J-11 tactical aircraft, those are fighter jets, that they carried out what's called an unsafe intercept of a U.S. reconnaissance plane over the South China Sea. This occurred on Tuesday, according to the defense official. At one point, these 2 Chinese jets, according to this official, came within 50 feet of the American aircraft. Again, this occurring over the South China Sea near those disputed islands that China has been constructing airstrips on and landing military planes on, that they are hotly disputed between China and other nations in that region. Also, the U.S. does not consider them legitimate Chinese territory, Wolf. But again, we're being told 2 Chinese fighter jets, J-11s, came a fairly unsafe distance away from a U.S. reconnaissance plane within 50 feet of it on Tuesday over the South China Sea. My colleague Jim Sciutto points out, for some context, this isn't the first time this has happened, but the Chinese usually resort to warnings for American reconnaissance jets over the radio. They usually don't fly this close. This is a relatively rare occurrence, and we're told by this U.S. official that Americans are protesting this through diplomatic and military channels.
Michael Fuchs, he is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs and a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. Great to have you on the program. And so as we heard there in that piece, as we set this up to the interview, President Obama saying that the lifting of this arms ban is all about normalizing relations with Vietnam, but obviously the prevailing belief is that, no, this is about countering China. How far do you think Vietnam will be willing to go when it comes to this new strategic partnership with the U.S. when it comes to staving off China in the South China Sea?
Well, I think that this step today is about both. It's about advancing the U.S.-Vietnam partnership, which has deepened significantly in recent years, and it's also about sending a very strong signal to China about concerns that both the United States and Vietnam have over China's worrying activities in the South China Sea. Now, again, I think that both the United States and Vietnam have very strong interests in avoiding conflict with China, and so does China. But what this is intended to do is show that the United States and that Vietnam are willing to deepen their partnership to uphold regional security in the South China Sea. So I think that that's a very important message that's going to be sent to China about any future steps that it might take in the South China Sea.
And how do you think China is going to receive this message? How do you think China will respond to what's happening there in the region with Vietnam, the Philippines also kind of warming relations, getting closer to the United States, and also the global pressure? I mean, you have the UN Arbitration Court ready to rule on China's territorial claims. Obviously, the belief is that, that the court will rule in favor of the Philippines. But, the U.S. has also been challenging China's territorial claims with these sail-bys with the U.S. warships. Do you expect that China will, I guess, increase its activity under this growing global pressure?
Well, I think that China, the United States, and the other actors in Asia right now all have their own strategies. And this is turning into basically a dance with increasing tensions as a result. Each party, China, the United States, Vietnam, the Philippines, and the others, are all pursuing their own strategies to protect what they believe are their interests in the South China Sea. And so I think that's in part of the reason why you saw China's response today was not over the top. It believes that it is going to just continue doing what it believes it needs to do to assert its authority in the South China Sea. And the other countries, the United States, Vietnam, and others, are going to continue to do what they need to do to uphold security and international rules and norms in the South China Sea. Now, of course, I think what we want to see happen increasingly is that the United States and China in particular, I think, can need to engage in some sort of a conversation about how to lower tensions and create a security framework in the South China Sea that can lower tensions, that can benefit everyone. But increasingly, we're going to see a dance like this to send signals back and forth to one another.
Yeah.
The The raging civil war in Yemen gave the al-Qaeda affiliate there the ability to move in and take over this southern port city of Mukalla, giving the most dangerous al-Qaeda group in the region a new place to dig in. In response, the Pentagon sent in a small number of U.S. troops to advise and assist Saudi and Emirati forces trying to eliminate the al-Qaeda threat. From the Middle East to Africa and beyond, the Obama administration is now involved in multiple small wars, fighting ISIS and al-Qaeda by using special operations forces. Though their numbers are small, using the best trained troops in the U.S. military is a massive commitment.
We're helping partners strengthen their security forces from Africa to Afghanistan.
Wars that are likely to outlast Obama's presidency.
The next president is going to get a whole bunch of small wars in his or her basket.
In Libya, there are an estimated 6,000 ISIS fighters and no central government to fight them.
We're going to continue to use the full range of our tools to roll ISIL back from Libya.
The Pentagon planning how and when to move in. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says a top priority
to further develop the intelligence that we would need to support operations in Libya.
In Somalia, 50 U.S. troops are at remote locations, advising and assisting Somali and African forces in the fight against the local al-Qaeda group known as al-Shabaab. And in West Africa, U.S. troops also trying to prevent ISIS and al-Qaeda from gaining toeholds there. The risks are huge, as the recent death of Navy SEAL Charles Keating shows. Just advising and assisting can turn into combat in seconds. Keating killed when other Navy SEALs came under fire in northern Iraq. No one's suggesting any of these small wars are going to subside by Inauguration Day here in the United States, a challenge for the next president.
We're exercising all facets of warfare that might be threatening to the region. This exercise is designed for three reasons. One is to enhance our military-to-military cooperation together. It's another establishment of regional security and ensure our interoperability, that we can work together. What's happened over time certainly shapes the type of scenarios that we create for the exercises. In this particular exercise, we're not only facing a conventional threat, but an unconventional threat at the same time.